Welcome to Tales, Tunes, and Tomfoolery starring Jerry Springer, along with Gene Galvin and me. I'm Megan Hills. We're recorded live in front of a brilliant studio audience at the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky.
My daddy came home.
And here he is, ladies and gentlemen, the Jerry Springer.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I always well up at this moment. It's just,
you know something, Megan? I tried real hard to get you and me locked in on calling him Mayor Springer.
Yeah, and I absolutely refused to do
I know
that.
you did. It just didn't take. And that's because
so
Jerry
did most of council, actually. Now that I
Even
think
back then.
and most of the people of Cincinnati.
Because Jerry Springer was the mayor of Cincinnati. Let's give a round of applause to Miss Bonnie Galvin, who just came in there.
Oh, you're going to
And
pay
that
for
was a
that.
look.
Oh.
She
Sir.
joined us up here on mic. No, she's not.
That was a look.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Jerry was mayor of Cincinnati, and all office holders receive the respect which they're due of being referred to by that title for the rest of their lives. And we call you Jerry, and I think that's sort of casual and disrespectful. So the fallback position, Megan, is I think we should call him Mr. Springer. It doesn't have to be mayor, but I think from here forward, you should introduce him as, ladies and gentlemen, now.
What's wrong with Mr. Jerry?
Mr. Jerry, because that's just
Mr.
creepy.
Jerry?
That's real creepy. No.
Has anybody,
Oh, good God. No.
has anybody, Jerry, ever called you in your recent life Mr. Springer?
Yes. And this was a great moment, at least for me, it was a great moment. Last week or 2 weeks ago, whatever, it was the week after the Super Bowl. It was like 2 days after the Super Bowl. And or 3 days, I'm on the Meredith daytime talk show. Mm-hmm. And it is taped before a live audience at 50 Rock in New York. And, you know, the Rockefeller Center there. But across the hall is the Tonight Show. And so I'm coming out of Meredith's show. The show's over. And I'm walking down the hallway to the elevator, and I hear someone from behind me say, Mr. Springer, Mr. Springer. Mr. Springer, you know.
Right.
My dad's not alive anymore. He's the only Mr. Springer I knew. So I turn around. It's Peyton Manning.
Shut up.
What?
Yeah.
Shut up.
Just won
God's
the Super
truth.
Bowl.
Yeah.
Peyton Manning called
But
you Mr.
that was what was so, he was so polite. And so, you know, because you think, oh, these jocks, hey, Jerry, how you doing? No. He was honestly a total Southern gentleman. He was
that's
just
really
so nice. And I'm there slobbering over myself. Anyway, so standing with him is Magic Johnson. Who,
Wow.
Well, I'm not dropping names, but
I mean,
it has
but
to
he
do.
just happened
Well,
to
no,
be there.
well, he was with him because both of them were appearing on the Tonight Show, and Magic I had met before several times in various showbiz things.
He
Whatever.
worked on your jump shot, I think you told me one time.
Yeah. So I'm standing there. So now a crowd's starting to form because it's Peyton Manning and Magic Johnson, and then this big nose guy, me. And so the three of us were standing there. We're chatting for a while. And then all of a sudden, as people are taking pictures, I say, come on, the three of us, we stand together. Three great athletes.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We'll go down in the history
And
books.
Peyton looks at me, what?
Yeah.
Mr. Springer.
You know what's crazy
It was
about
fun.
that?
That was cool. I was all excited.
It's actually very cool that, now think about this. Peyton Manning knows you only from your TV show, what one would assume.
Yeah.
And your TV show, it is what it is. Let's just put it that way.
Oh,
it is
it's
what
art.
it is. And,
Art.
so he ends up seeing you as a Mr. Springer instead of Jerry. And what's interesting about that is we were driving down here, you told me
Yes.
that today on your show, now this isn't the show that ran live. They don't run live. They're
No, right.
recorded.
This'll be in a
It'll
few
play
weeks.
down
Yeah.
the line. But on the show, and Megan, this is freaking unbelievable. There was a
really was.
woman on his show today, says about 20 years old, and she tells him that, did she tell this on air, that she was at age 5 in the green room of the show while her mother was on the show.
No, it's
Second
generational.
generation, Megan.
Doesn't
And her
not
mom,
good.
Megan, was a stripper, and she's a stripper.
No.
Could-
no.
could-
And Peyton Manning's calling him Mr.
Yes,
Springer.
We should write him a letter.
in my
you
culture, we say
serious?
you could just cavell. the pride in knowing that, yeah, we are.
Future generations.
She was in. She told me on stage. She says, "By the way, Jerry, my mom was on your show, and she was at the age of 5." In the green room, we have babysitters for our guests. Well, a lot of shows do because they bring their children. Yeah. And she was playing with blocks, and she kind of remembered that, but she didn't remember. And I said, "What was your mother on for?" And she says, "Well, she was involved in a triangle, and she was a stripper." And then I said, "Well, that's what you do now." She says, "Yeah." But.
Wow.
In fairness to her, she really was a sweet young lady, had done nothing. In other words, she was, in this story, she happened to be the good person. She was the one that was cheated on all that, and she's faithful and all that. But anyway,
She fought, though. Did she fight today?
Did she fight?
Yeah, she was
she a good
weak with
fighter?
a jab, but that right hook.
Yeah.
Oh.
Because I asked him if she fought better than the mom. He says, to be honest, I can't remember. There's a lot of fights that he's seen, Megan. So,
Yeah.
Hey,
Wow.
Jerry, this is something
Wow.
that may surprise you. It all
We are
fits
the.
in
I'll
with
just
this
finish
motif.
with this.
Yeah.
We are the only, and this is where we are the only talk show that has we raise our own guests.
Yeah. All right.
Some of them conceived on
we
the show.
we have a farm system.
A guest farm. Yeah.
It's a farm down in Alabama. And we raise our own guests.
We're sorry,
Just like-
Alabama.
Perfect. Yeah.
We're sorry.
No, I'm
Just
proud.
like tilapia, that's farm
Jerry's
raised,
guest
and
is farm
this
raised.
guest is
Everyone else has
farm
to
raised.
wait till someone calls, not us. What do you got down there next? Oh, there's this beauty coming up.
Oh my God.
Hey, by the way, there's a bicycle company, a well-known bicycle company called Felt, and Felt has some accessory parts. And guess what, Jerry? They have for their cruiser bike, which is like a beach bike, they have a spring, a front suspension, and they have the Jerry Springer fork. You can go online and see it. And they also, by the way, have the Abraham linkage fork.
Well, I could see how
But
they put both of us together.
That's what I'm saying.
What? First of all, what's a fork?
I can't.
Well, it's a spring. A spring.
Oh.
A suspension.
On
for
a
the
bike.
Oh, I didn't know
It
that.
bounces,
Yeah.
it's a little forgiving thing.
And it's a Springer.
A Springer, that's the point.
Where's the Lincoln though?
I don't know. That's a different one. That's yeah. Well, hey, by the way,
don't get it.
speaking of all of that, there's a politician not here tonight. I don't know. Maybe he's here because a well-known politician in the Ludlow area, and something really bad happened to him yesterday while he was out on the street. He got mugged. Guy stuck a gun in his
Oh, my
ribs and
gosh.
says,
What did he say?
He said, "Give me your money." And the guy says, "Wait a minute, do you understand who I am? I'm a United States congressman." He says, "Well, then give me my money."
I thought we were done with these.
Oh, we're never done. No, that was good. That was
Was
good.
that-
Actually, that was very good.
Didn't I send you some jokes? You're not going to use them. I sent you some,
told you he
because
doesn't
you
read
wouldn't
the
look them up
rundowns.
on your own.
Well, I think I might have even said this. I'm hosting the Price is Right Live, the national tour. Well, we did in Cincinnati this weekend over at the Horseshoe Casino or whatever. So there was some material that you might have heard that I went over.
Yeah, that.
And my wife, God love her, we've been married 42 years, and Mickey is just wonderful. Not the world's greatest cook, but she is wonderful.
Really, you're going to say that? Huh?
Is this
Hey,
live?
Mickey, how you doing?
No, yeah.
I would never do this because my wife
No, I
is
mean,
sitting
and I-
right there.
Yeah.
I'm not
She's
doing
wonderful. She's just, not a great cook. In our house, we pray after the meal.
Hey, hey,
By the way, that was not true at all.
Was that was
And-
the joke?
yeah.
That was the whole thing.
that was a joke.
Oh my God. I'm still going.
She was waiting for the punchline.
I really did. Sorry, Jerry. Anyway.
Hey, let's send a
Yes.
shout out
Yes.
to Dave Hall. And Jerry, Dave Hall is a countryman of yours. He's from Alton, Hampshire, England.
Oh, yeah.
And Jerry, by the way, was born in England. Otherwise, he would have already been president or would be running this time, but he can't because he was not born in America. Might get sued by Donald Trump if he tries it.
I'm going to run with Cruz.
And Dave Hall, Dave Hall is hiking America. Came over from England.
Yes.
He's with his girlfriend. where they're doing a big chunk of America. It's pretty impressive. They're starting in New Orleans, Louisiana, and they're going to hike up to Seattle, Washington. Wow. And he's a big fan of the podcast. I know about this because he sent me an email to jerryspringer.com.
Yeah.
And I've asked him if we could stay in touch with him periodically.
As he's...
Yeah, and he could just sort of give us a British view of America going from the deep south to the northwest of America.
That's a great idea. Cool. If he would start the other way, if he would start north and go south, he'd know when he reached the end of America because there'd be a wall.
Yes. Yes. Hey.
Is this thing on?
Hey.
Is it?
Speaking of that, and now we're live. There are people who are listening on our live feed at jerryspringer.com. If you're hearing this in an archive version, be aware that on our website, and we're sort of tweaking the website, but it may be there today, and if not, when you hear this, it will be. And you'll see a schedule of the Tuesday nights that we're recording. We don't record every Tuesday night, but quite a few. And we start at 7:30 Eastern time. And you would have a chance, if you choose to listen in real time, because there's so much going on politically. There's so much breaking news, new news. And for example, I wanted to pick your brain on unions in America.
Yes.
And by the way, there's some interesting figures. Unions are dropping in the percentage of the workforce, according to U.S. labor statistics. They're dropping in their raw numbers, the total number of people. It's gone roughly, when they started taking statistics back in the mid-'80s, 20+% of the workforce was unionized. Today it's about 11, rounded off to about 12%. Went from about 17 million workers to about 14.5. So the numbers aren't dropping off as heavily in raw numbers. That's because the population is growing. And it made me wonder, pick your brain, because you have this wonderful theme of liberals always win. What do we think? And we have, in a minute, we're going to talk to a young man who is a young union member. I thought this is very interesting. A young man named Nick Williams, who we're going to bring into the conversation in a second. But let me pick your brain for a second, Jerry. What is happening with unions in your opinion? And do you think they are as relevant today as they were back in the 60s and 50s and turn of the century, even Industrial Revolution?
They are as necessary today as they ever were. It is sad, and it is bad for our country, and it is bad for capitalism. It is bad for free enterprise if unions fade away. You cannot have a free enterprise system that works if you don't have a powerful labor force, powerful union movement. And the reason is this. Capitalism exists to make a profit. That's what drives it. You know, you are going to work hard at whatever you do to make a product or provide a service because you want to get in return money back so you can provide for your family and the things you want. That is all very noble. So the whole pressure of capitalism, of free enterprise here in America, the entire pressure of the system is to make as much profit as you can, whatever your field. Now, the way you make a profit is to cut expenses. That's a major part of it. So every single business, every single person will try to hire as few people as possible at as low a wage as possible in order to have a better bottom line. Even when you want someone to mow your yard, you'll ask how much do they charge, and you'll go usually for the better price. Everyone is trying to hire as few people as possible. No business goes out and says, you know what, we don't really need these extra people, but let's hire them anyway because the people need jobs. They don't do that. So if you can be replaced by a computer, they'll do that. If they can hire someone at a lower wage overseas, they'll do that. The whole system is built, once again, to hire as few people as possible at as low a wage as possible, and that's how you make a profit. Now, knowing that that's our system, and that's what makes America profitable and been so successful, knowing that we have to have a countervailing force to push back against the drive of we've got to make as much profit as possible. If you don't give working people a force to push back against that, eventually we'll all be working for only 5 companies and making virtually no money. So if you want to save capitalism in America, if you want to save free enterprise in America, you better make sure there's a force pushing back against the profit motive to balance it, not to eliminate it, not to make business unprofitable. Nobody's suggesting that. We're just saying they have to negotiate, they have to bargain for what is the best price where we can make a profit and we can get people working for us and they will be able to make a living. The danger now is as unions are being done away with, there's no one to push back. And that is why all of a sudden people aren't making sufficient wages to provide for themselves. Even if the stock market goes up, the wages aren't. Your standard of living is not going up. That is the reason. Another 10 years of this, another 15 or 20 years of this, it's over. You can't keep having people not being able to make a living. Eventually, they're going to protest. Eventually, they will be on the streets. Eventually, what's happening in Europe will happen here. People can take it for just so long. So it's very smart for every business community, every government community, every neighborhood, for people to say, you know what, we want strong, healthy unions. It does not mean that there are no abuses within a union. No one says when there's a Madoff or some corrupt business person, we should do away with free enterprise, we should do away with businesses because some businessmen are crooked. So why every time someone in organized labor does something untoward, we say, see, those unions, we got to do away with unions. No. If you want free enterprise, you better have a strong union movement.
Nick, I'd like to bring you in. We have Nick Williams, who's a member of Local 212, if I'm not mistaken, an electricians union in the greater Cincinnati area. And Nick is somebody who has joined a union, and I'd like you to tell your story, but I understand you're starting a company that will then be a union shop, correct?
Yeah, I joined the apprenticeship in 2009 and went to 5 years of training for that, and I'm a third-generation union worker. My dad and my uncle were both union workers, and my grandpa was a union worker, and it's been a way of life for us. We all believe in good wages and job safety, and everything the union has provided us, everything that my life has been because of the union. Deciding to open up a company and be an open shop, that doesn't go with how I was raised, or basically what America's been built on and what built the middle class.
Yep.
Your decision to be a union electrician was caused by the legacy of your family, clearly, but what advantages do you see? You kind of hinted at 2 of them. One would be safety. People think it's always money. It's not necessarily only money. It's
Right.
working conditions,
Well,
etc. Talk a little bit about that.
A lot of people these days seem to take for granted the working environment that we have, and they forget that the union has provided this for the majority of the working force of America, fighting for the last 125 years or so, and literally shed blood for these rights that we take for granted today. And they're trying to do away with it. Without unions, like Jerry was saying, you can't move forward in America.
The tricky dilemma, Nick and Jerry and Megan, is the cost. If
Right.
American consumers want things to be as cheap as they possibly can be, then that puts pressure on companies to employ people for as little as they can, which is what you were speaking to, the theory you were talking about. And that's where this whole thing gets tricky, to get the American consumer to accept. Tell me if this isn't the bottom line. I will accept to pay a little more for a product to know that it's a human wage for the workers, safe working conditions, a better quality of life for all Americans. Isn't that it in a nutshell?
Yeah, but what business has to remember is that the workers are also consumers.
Right.
Right.
So if you keep not paying workers enough, they're not going to be able to buy the goods that you're manufacturing or the services that you're applying. And Henry Ford And there were a lot of things about him I did not like. But Henry Ford, back in, the teens and 1920s, he was smart enough to recognize that he needed to have people that could afford to buy his cars. So when he made the assembly line, he started out by saying, well, we got to pay these people enough that they can buy my car. Mm-hmm. And that's what really was the whole start of the mass production of, at least in terms of the automobile industry. And so that's an important thing to remember. So the very same business that doesn't want to pay the workers then wonders, well, how come people aren't buying our products? How come, we're going into this recession again or whatever? So, we can enjoy this stock market bubble. I hope it's not a bubble, but we can enjoy the stock market, but we have to recognize that that's not the only indication of what's happening here. We better get to this issue of what they make as a wage. Because if that doesn't improve, again, I'm telling you, in 10, 15 years, if that long, people aren't going to take it anymore. And our politics is going to get very, very extreme.
How old are you, Nick?
28.
I have socks your age.
That he's wearing tonight.
Do you have friends who also are unionists? And how do you see the lay of the land among, and Megan, the same question to you, of your peers? Do they look at unions as a viable way of life, protection, et cetera?
To be honest, not really, especially in Cincinnati. The opportunities out there and the jobs aren't being filled. I mean, Cincinnati's one of the fastest growing cities right now. There's a ton of construction going on.
Being from this area as well, and in the business side of things here, unfortunately, union has a negative connotation. How is that when you're trying to recruit people to work with you? What does that look like for you?
We have to go out and SALT, it's called, and go to non-union job sites, and they're pretty much more or less brainwashed against the union, and that's across the country. There was a time where we held the majority, 90% of the work was union. Mm-hmm. Now it's down to 20%, and it's, the biggest threat to us is the right to work state. They're trying to take away collective bargaining from unions, and like Jerry was saying, it doesn't matter if you're union or not, everybody benefits from the unions.
I think maybe something to consider at some point, and they have it in Europe. I'd like to see a way where we can all join a union, even if we're not at a union job. You can become a member of the AFL-CIO, send in your dues. But if there was a national movement where all working people would contribute to a powerful national union, then I think there would be some clout. Even people stay-at-home moms and dads, they could join a union. Look, I'm a Democrat, but I got to be honest. The only entity that exists in America that is always for working people are unions. Democrats most often are, but every once in a while they're not, because they have a large constituency with other issues. But the union movement, that's working people. It's the only thing on their agenda. So maybe if we got all Americans, working class Americans, to join a national union, can you imagine the clout? I mean, anybody running for office, anyone running for president, they would all, oh my gosh, we got to come, because right now they're going with this Citizens United case. They're all going to the wealthy corporations and billionaires or whatever. But, not even billionaires can outspend all of Americans. Working people, that's what we ought to be doing. We ought to be all getting together. So I think a national labor movement would be a good thing. And so I am announcing today. No, I'm not.
Hey, Nick, thanks for being here and telling
you,
the story. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. Good comments. Hey, in a second, we're going to hear from the Willow Tree Carolers.
Wait, Mickey's on the phone.
Wonderful group, yeah.
Honey, I was kidding.
Hope, but
I was
she's not.
kidding about the cooking. Your food's good. Oh, that chicken was delicious, honey. No, I swear.
Mickey just listened to the recording. It's recorded. No. Hey, before we hear from the Willow Tree Carolers, I wanted to ask you something. And I know about this from conversations we've had, but you have a cousin. And speaking of the your Jewish background and religion and all of that, and this sort of slightly relates to all that, but you have a Jewish cousin that you found that you didn't know about, and you found in a very unique way. Tell us about that.
The BBC does this program. It's a story that winds up happy, even though the story itself is a downer. The BBC does this program, Who Do You Think You Are? And several years ago, this was back in '07, it was just in England at the time, or Great Britain. And they would pick 4 people a year, and they would go back as many centuries as they could in covering your background. So they asked me, this was, as I said, back in '07, and they spend 9 months traveling around the world, finding out as much as they can about your family's history. And the BBC has the clout of a major institution. And then they don't tell you anything. You just give them permission. And then you show up in London on a given date, and I showed up with my sister, and you, for 10 days, they take you around the world following your family's background, and you don't know where they're taking you. Well, they took my family back to 1773.
Wow.
But most of it was at the various camps where they were exterminated. And so we'd go to and the story was horrific, as you know. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. So, and we go to one camp, and we lost the entire generation of my mom's family. In other words, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, they all were exterminated. We never knew. We knew, you know, when I grew up in England, because Mom and Dad got out, they're German Jews, and they got out the first week of August of 1939. As you know, September 1st of 39, 3 weeks later, Hitler goes into Poland to start World War II, and the gates shut. So Mom and Dad were the 87th and 88th, according to the visa numbers, last Jews let out of Germany before the war started. So that was a miracle they got out. And my sister was born the next month, and then I was born during the war. Anyway, so we go and visit these camps where they died. My mom's mom died at a place called Chelmo, which was an extermination camp. You were only there for 36 hours, and then you were gassed. But then we went, among other places, to Theresienstadt, which is in Prague, or right outside Prague. And that's where my dad's mom was exterminated. And they have the records. I mean, they would tell you what experiments were done on them, which days they were fed. I mean, it was as awful as you've read, and et cetera. It was that awful. Anyway, all those records are there. So I'm at Theresienstadt. It's the last day of the 10-day tour. And there's a creek there. And what the Germans did is, by 44, 45, as the Russians were coming, what the Germans had done is they exterminated you, and then they cremated you, because that added the insult to the injury, because you weren't, because Jews aren't supposed to be cremated, but they cremated every one of them and put them in jars. So they had like 10,000 jars there. But the Russians were coming, and the Germans, knowing at this point that they're going to lose the war, they wanted to be captured by the Americans, not by the Russians, because of what Germany did to Russia during the war, the Soviet Union at the time. They knew it would be a horrible, horrible extinction for them. So as the Russians were coming, they took all the jars of the ashes and poured it into the creek. So now, if you went there today, all you'd see is flat land and then this little creek. So I'm standing by the creek, saying this, the Kaddish, which is a Jewish prayer, but no one else is around other than the BBC, filming it. But then I notice to my left, standing there, is another gentleman suddenly walks up, and he's saying prayers. And it turns out that he's one generation behind me. He's my daughter's generation. His great-grandmother was my grandfather's sister. And neither of us knew the other existed. So I'm standing doing the prayers, and then he starts, he knew, because the BBC brought him. So he said, "What are you here for?" And I said, the happy ending to the story, though, is And then he said who he was, and we're hugging each other and crying and all that. But the happy ending of the story is he and his family live in Haifa, in Israel. And 3 days earlier, the BBC found him. In other words, the series was already done when they suddenly found him through all their record chasing.
Wow.
He describes this, it's just great. He gets a phone call, and from they saying, this is the BBC. Is this your own Matar? Yes, it is. And they ask him basic questions to make sure they got the right person. And they figured out it was the right person. Said, well, we have found a relative of yours whose family also survived the same camp that, was at the same camp that your great-grandmother was. Oh, wonderful. It says, a producer will call you back in 20 minutes and give you the details. What we'd like to do is fly you to Prague, and you will meet him, and we're doing the program on it, etc. So he's all excited, of course. He calls all the relatives that live in town. They all come over to the house. They're sitting by the phone. Now he gets the call from the BBC, and he says, who is this? What's his name? It's Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer? Because they get the show in Israel. I mean... it's like, here's the good news, here's the bad. But he's just this wonderful guy. He's about 10, 12 years younger than me. A wonderful family, and we've been with them several times since. We constantly on the phone with each other. Here's the eerie part. We have the exact same birthday. I mean, February 13th, the same day. You remember we called him from there. Yep. So, anyway, so that's a story. I didn't mean to bring it down, but it.
Good story, though.
But by the way, Jerry, you're a brother to me. I didn't draw that out of you. That's obviously a tough story.
Yeah, but it's a great story.
But it's a good story, and and it'd be very cool for his first name is
Yaron.
Yaron. If Yaron could meet the daughter that was on your show today and her mom, those two generations.
See how you're
I don't know. I'm trying to find a connection here. Just so
do you understand why I have identity problems? It's hard to get my head around my life.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I bet it is.
It doesn't. It's not consistent.
Let's bring forward the Willow Tree Carolers, and they're going to come. For those who are listening and not our wonderful studio audience, it's sort of a tight dodge to get in here among audience and mic stands, etc. But let me tell you a little bit about them as they're moving to their instruments. They're from the Cincinnati, Ohio area. And we have Dave Sparks on percussion. We have on the upright bass, Moose. We've got Josh Sparks on the banjo. Brandon Martin on the banjo and the ukulele, and we also have Don Weiss on the fiddle. And their latest album is Willow Tree Carolers, and you can get copies of it right here at the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky. And are you guys good to go? If so, we'd love to hear a first song.
It'll soon be fall, it'll soon be fall.
That's the Willow Tree Carolers. By the way, their website is willowtreecarolers.com. And we at Jerry Springer Podcast, Tales, Tunes, and Tomfoolery, we pride ourselves in bringing forward people who, some from the greater Cincinnati, northern Kentucky, you know, we're a tri-state area, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, but we've also had people from across the country. But it's always cool to have up-and-comers in here and to feature your music, and we appreciate you guys coming in. Are two of you brothers, by the way? I mean, there's two guys here with the name Sparks, because we're just meeting for the first time. So are Josh and Dave brothers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Josh here, Dave there. We both grew up on the west side of Cincinnati,
All right.
very close to here.
And yeah, and I don't know if you knew this, but Jerry Springer also lived for years on the west side of Cincinnati.
Yeah, they didn't. No one admitted it, but
West Side. didn't
he's
claim
not
him.
from this neighborhood. No.
Right next door to Steve Shabbat.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Steve Shabbat is the congressman.
His
Westwood,
wife was
yeah.
my dental hygienist.
Is that right?
This was before he ran for office. Yeah, and then as
Yeah.
soon as he ran, I changed dentists.
Yeah, you didn't.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't.
Any of
I'm just
their
kidding.
hands in your mouth. I get it.
Yeah.
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 No, Steve Shabbat's a good guy.
He is, he is.
Politically
He's
wacky,
wrong, but he's a nice
you know,
guy.
but he's a, you know, he's a good
delightful
guy.
man.
Yeah.
Delightful guy.
Hey, do another song, would you?
1 foot in the grave.
Willow Tree Carolers. Jerry's asking who the young lady is on the fiddle, and that's Dawn Weiss.
It's such a great combination of
It really is.
instruments together. I mean, having the fiddle along with the obviously
It's
the
got a great
guitar.
sound.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's the first time I've heard this song, first time I've met you guys. Is the opening of that, is there a reference to the Trail of Tears, Cherokee Indians,
the
Thousand
Indians,
Mile
they
Walk
walked the Trail of
from
Tears, yep, that's
Smoky
first.
Mountains to Oklahoma? And I got to tell you, and I was a Vista volunteer back after college, and I worked on a Native American reservation in northern Minnesota, and those are Great Lakes Indians, not Plains Indians, or the Cherokee was a whole different kind of area of the country. The sound that you guys created, you wrote this, right?
Josh did.
The sound that you created has a Native American sound, almost like the chanting that you hear. I don't know if that's intentional. That's good work. I give these guys props for that. That's a good song. That's a good song. All right. Do us a favor, and this is going to be tough because we're going to propose that Jerry Springer sing one of the verses with you. But the old song, Irene, Good Night.
Oh, guys, this will make your career.
Yeah, this could be
So we're
it.
sorry. It was lovely to meet you.
You've been listening to Tales, Tunes, and Tomfoolery, recorded live at the Folk School Coffee Parlor in Ludlow, Kentucky. Thanks to Patrick Kennedy for writing our opening song, and to you for listening. Check out our website at jerryspringer.com.
I'll see you in my dream. I love Irene, Lord knows I do. I'll love her till the seas run dry. And if Irene turns her back on me, I'll take morphine and die. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams.
Mr. Jerry Springer.
Sometimes I live in the country, and sometimes I live in town. Sometimes I have a great notion to jump in the river and drown. Irene, good night. Irene, good night. Good night, Irene. Good night, Irene. I'll see